everyone, and welcome to your favorite cybersecurity podcast. I mean, it's our favorite cybersecurity podcast as well, not another demo. And it's your favorite security podcast because we're the only one that guarantees you no marketing jargon, no acronyms, and no PowerPoint slides. Just a regular, real conversation with a vendor about what they're doing for their customers. I am joined today by the one and only Mr. Aaron Bregg. And I know what everyone is thinking. You're thinking, Matt, back up a minute. This podcast, it lacks cohesion. In fact, there's no cohesity to anything that you ever say, to which I say, I agree with you. And so I am very fortunate today. We're going to fix that because I have with us Eric Johnson, Spencer Varican, and Prashant Shah from Cohesity. And we are going to talk all about backups and security getting involved in backups, reasons for it. We're going to talk through that whole entire space. So Spencer, with that, I'm going to pass it over to you. Introduce yourself, the rest of the team a little bit, and then let's dive into it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. I'm Spencer Varican, Senior Account Executive here at Cohesity, working with enterprise strategic accounts locally and, helping them with some of the largest organizations and tackling their most critical data security challenges. With me, I have Eric Johnson. He's our Field Technical Director. From a territory perspective, I'm not even sure that he covers just that, but he's in the biggest deals that you can imagine and is been with us for a little bit, and I'll let him introduce himself. And then also my Senior SE, Prashant, is with us, and he's been very formidable at tackling some of these big challenges at hand and has been with us a few years and dealing also with some larger customers out of the Chicago area recently, and has been covering with me the last few months.
So, Eric, I'll throw this over to you, and then I'll let you use that as a little bit of a place to introduce yourself as well. But, I think historically speaking, we've looked at and maybe describe what like backup in 2024 even means. But I think we have historically looked at the backups of our organization as an infrastructure role or an operations role. So tell us a little bit about like the state of backup in 2024.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing backup a long time. And it used to be one of those things where it was really infrastructure focused. You were really concerned about hardware failures, data corruption, that sort of thing, where you're backing up maybe to tape or local disk. And the big concerns were like, we don't want to lose data locally. We want to be able to recover, and we lose disks or lose a server. We want to be able to get things back up and running. And it was like an insurance policy. And at that time, backups were always just kind of given to the new guy, right? This is where you cut your teeth. You're going to deal with the backups. And then things changed a little bit. Companies grew, uptime became more important. And then there was a big focus on disaster recovery and having high availability in your backups. So then you're running to disk and you're replicating between sites. And then it became more important, right? You had to have a disaster recovery plan. You had to know what it's going to take to bring things back up. Maybe not only at your primary site, but at a second site in the case of a data center loss. Because it's not acceptable anymore for companies to be down for long periods of time. And then we've had another switch too, right? With the introduction of more ransomware and happening, every day to large companies. And so we've seen another kind of movement in backups and another importance where cyber recovery is kind of the latest thing. And now you're not just the backup guy anymore. You have to have some security posture to what you're doing and have more visibility in cyber resilience, expertise in what you're doing to ensure that when you get hit with a cyber attack, your company's not going to be on the hook for paying a ransom. You're going to be able to recover quickly and efficiently and prevent your business from a huge loss. So there's been a huge focus now around backups and security, so that we're not just talking to the backup guy anymore. We're not just trying to reduce cost, make things easier. We're trying to improve company security posture to withstand a ransomware attack.
All right. So the first question for you, and Prashant, feel to jump in. For those of us in Michigan, obviously we've dealt with a couple big healthcare cybersecurity breaches or incidents. It's more than just breaches, right? To the point where, leadership at the company that I work for on the clinical side is asking, okay, hey, Ascension, I think it was 30 some days to like recovery, right? One of the big questions that they're asking, right, is what do we need to do to reduce that, understanding that healthcare budgets, going into next year or the year after, right? The boomers are done retiring and the older Gen Xers got a year or two to go, right? So we're going to, between, this is my guess, this is not based on inside information with my leadership, but I'm assuming 25, 26, or 27, right? You're going to start seeing healthcare budgets shift because of, the boomers not retiring like they were over the last couple of years. That being said, you're going to have budget restrictions and stuff like that. What conversations are you having with healthcare, maybe just peers in general, to right? How can you reduce that, that time to recovery by changing, your strategy with your cyber resilience, especially because, as you called out, right, there's business requirements and there's cybersecurity requirements. So interested to see what you're seeing in the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it's funny, when I started here about 3.5 years ago, it was a totally different conversation, as Eric mentioned, and it just so happened that after starting here in the greater Chicago area and at some point in Wisconsin and such, um, I just had back-to-back engagements with large healthcare organizations, and then so for the last year, I was exclusively focusing on healthcare. So I have seen this unfold. Um, Unfortunately, I had actually a customer locally here that went through a cyber event, so I had a firsthand look at how disruptive it is, how many people are affected, how chaotic it becomes. So, from a backup perspective, the conversations are more holistic now, right? In terms of, okay, we've got your data, but what else? And as we talk about the recovery aspect of it being a team sport, we're just one piece of the puzzle, but we're a very important piece of the puzzle because in your darkest hour, we have your data. And at Cohesity, we pride on the fact that we can assure you that if you follow some of our security best practices, that the data on the platform will guarantee to be there no matter what, right? So in terms of what we're doing around that is, historically there has been a lot of focus on, I would say, prevention. And from what we've seen, we've all followed the MGM attack and some of the other ones where no matter what you do, somehow the bad guys always find a way to get in. It's not about what tools you have in place. It's more than that. Social engineering has become a big aspect of it. So in terms of all that, it's kind of a given that at some point you'll be breached, because the most secure, people with very large budgets that spend a lot of money on these tools, you see their names in the news, right? It's not for the lack of tools. It's not for the lack of competency of these teams. It's just that's the moving target. So what we try to do here is focus on, if you follow the NIST cybersecurity framework and such, we focus on the respond and recovery pillars, right? In terms of, what actions do I need to take when we're under a breach, and how do I identify what needs to be restored in what manner and order of importance. At Cohesity here, we talk a lot about, Eric and some of the other field technical directors, when they get in front of the customer, obviously they talk about things like minimum viable environment or so-called dial tone applications. Everything is kind of really chaotic in this situation. If you get attacked, we try to focus on how quickly can we get you back up and running. And some of our underlying technologies in the Cohesity file system around how we handle snapshots, how we don't require you to rehydrate anything, right? Everything, if you restore something from 3 years ago or 3 days ago or 3 months ago, with Cohesity, you'll have the same experience in terms of how quickly we can get you back up and running. We have, if you get in the weeds, we have kind of a mass recovery platform with VMware that it gives you instant recovery of hundreds of VMs. Eric lives in a patch where one of the largest banks in the country did a POC with all of our competitors, and it was partner driven. It wasn't even something Cohesity did, and we came out on top. So I think we really shine in that type of an environment where you're under attack, you need to get back up and running. And this is an ever evolving space, right? In the last few months, there has been a lot of discussion on clean room recovery. We do tabletop exercises with our customers on, laying out a plan, a mock scenario, or ransomware workshops do the same exact thing. They kind of put you in a situation where you are in the hot seat, and it unfolds from there. So, um, what we do outside of just the core backup has been kind of where the company is going.
Yeah.
Data classification, threat hunting, using AI for quicker answers from the platform of the data we already have and such.
So, so is it getting to
Nailed
be
it.
more of a matter of, instead of from a security perspective of like, I'm going to protect my organization from being breached, to chances are pretty good at some point I'm probably going to be breached and I need to be able to recover from it? I mean, is that a slightly different take on the security mindset? Aaron, I'll even throw that over to you.
I mean, I think it is. I mean, I think everyone has to be prepared that you're going to get breached eventually, and you have to have a plan. Because when you get breached, and fortunately, I sat on a cyber response team for a while, and so I got to sit through a number of breaches. And I would say the worst part about it is sitting there and watching some of my customers just kind of argue about what comes first, who's responsible, who's going to make the call. How do you discern an outage from an attack? In some cases, when something starts, did the server go down? Did something data corruption happen, or was this an attack? What's the threat? How did they get entry? What's the scope of it? Is it one server? Is it a group of servers? Is it an application? Is there persistence in the environment? How big is it? Can it be maintained? And then when you finally figure some of that stuff out, coming up with a clear remediation plan and the steps to get there is really critical. And how do you do that? You've got to have some sort of clean room. You have to have a staging environment where you can bring things up, scan it, ensure that the steps you've taken are going to remediate the attack before you put it back in production. I think we've seen that, in a large account that was assisting the automotive industry with some of their software and supply chain, where they got hit with an attack. They recovered instantly, but they reintroduced the ransomware back into their environment and were down again within minutes.
Yeah.
You have to have a plan. You have to remediate it before you can recover.
Yeah, and then also something to add to that, what I've seen is they have a plan. Like Eric, when an organization is even rock solid, they have the plan, it's all there. But then what happens when what hits the fan? Like, have you tested that out? Have you walked through, like a scenario, like a fire drill of what's going to happen? Because it's different. It's practicing it, right? I mean, we've all done something where we got good at it and practiced. You're not going to do it without having some sort of practice. And then, with the recent events of, actually someone that we integrate well with, that's part of the cloud security alliance that we have with CrowdStrike, right? When that went down, a lot of people felt that. We've seen organizations have internet outages, and it's not even a ransomware attack, but all of a sudden the resilience plan went out the window because they never practiced it. They had it down, but it didn't work the way they thought it would. So it's like consistently testing it, walking through that. And that's where, we've done well with organizations that are doing things with their SOC and with their SIM and, all of that other stuff. What are you doing from a SOAR perspective? We have all those integrations from XDR, EDR, that is where we've been built differently, is having that. And, threat intelligence, I don't want to say an acronym, but open APIs to be able to work to be able to work within those
I'm trying to remember what that one even is. Yeah.
Right.
Somebody knows.
Wasn't it Mike Tyson that said that, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face? And that's really what happens here. You got to have a plan, but you have to test it and test it regularly, because these threats change every day. It's not the same thing every time. You have to test your plan.
And
application programming interface. That was API. Now we can go back to saying API. That's how that works. So
sorry, now we know.
We understand why there are acronyms, right? For sure. Nobody wants to say all those words together. Let's take a step back, I guess, from an overall like corporate standpoint. When we're just talking about backups, or when someone comes to you to talk about backups, what does that mean? Like, what exactly are we backing up, or what is it that a company should be looking at backing up to, especially from a security slant of like, recovering from a ransomware attack? But I guess let's go back to like, what does backup mean?
Yeah. I mean, there's many different forms of that. There's backup in the sense of creating an immutable copy. And then there's backup in a sense of like a rapid recovery. And maybe it's a combination of those things, where you might have a snapshot based architecture where you can revert instantly. And then you have your backups for your immutable copy. I think the industry standard of the 3-2-1 methodology for backup still applies. 3 copies of your data, 1 being production, 2nd being your backup, 3rd being an offsite copy somewhere. needing to have those additional copies to avert any sort of scenario, whether that's a disaster or cyber attack, is really critical.
Mhm.
And understanding your environment and the criticality and priority of those applications that you're running, because not every application is treated equal. There's applications in your environment that are mission critical to keeping the business up and running. And then there's some of those applications that they could be down a week and will be okay. So we got to focus on what keeps the business running, what keeps the products going out the door and the money coming in. And I talk to a lot of customers that don't even have a clear understanding of what those applications and their
That
dependencies are.
was just where I was going to be.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but it's a relevant question. You're starting an engagement with a new company, right? Like
Mhm.
they're maybe not mature in their data or in their cyber resiliency. What is your beginning thing? Is it for them to have an exercise to identify those, or like
Yeah.
what's the first thing you guys do?
I mean, that's the application dependency mapping, and it's something that we help customers with, but we usually come in from a partner, and the partner's already assisted customers in that because it's kind of an arduous task of figuring out which applications are most important. So once that's done, um, we come in, ask those questions, figure out what those applications are, and then we do a sizing and an architecture design, and try to come up with something that meets requirements for each of our customers. And those vary vastly from account to account.
Yeah.
And taking a step back, the discovery becomes a pretty important part of the whole thing because sometimes when we start to work with the customer and gather data, they're like, wait a minute, we have 7,000 VMs. We really should be backing up these other 700 as well. Like there's a gap that they discover, right? Like, okay, we didn't back up something that we should have been because we try to be as comprehensive as possible. Then it becomes, okay, well, what does the retention policy look like, right? Do we store this much data locally? Can we send some to the cloud? Cohesity was we were in kind of a newer platform, so some of the others were born when cloud wasn't even a thing, ransomware wasn't even a thing. Whereas with us, those were present day things when our company was started. So we integrate with cloud really well, right? So if you want to have longer term, in healthcare, obviously with HIPAA and other regulations, sometimes data is kept for 7 years or longer. It's almost forever. They don't, there's not even so how do you take this data that needs to be there for a long time, but you don't want to keep it in your data center because it's costly? So we have all these conversations, and just in terms of backup, just stepping back, like what features do you want? We do granular folder file-based recovery. So when you want to recover something, how nice is it to just look for a particular file, folder, database, VM, search for it quickly and find it and recover it? So, when we break it down to the hyperconverged nature of the platform and all the inherent benefits that come with it in terms of scalability and simplicity, non-disruptive upgrades, uh, going it back to basics, as you indicated earlier, these are really kind of long introductory conversations. But again, these days, it's all security. All the
Mhm.
different security methodologies that we have incorporated from the foundation of the file system, including immutability, and then warm lock features to the other things I mentioned on top, like putting data in a secure cloud vault or introducing other things like data classification and threat hunting and so on.
You did
Yeah.
say an acronym though before I let Aaron ask a question. You said WORM, but
Yeah.
throwing it out.
Well, that's a good leeway, a good not leeway, segue into like my question. Do some of the customers understand that this is going to be like a little bit of a journey? Because I
Mhm.
think Eric, you were talking about kind of like get that minimal viable product just to get the lights up and running,
Yep.
and then you have secondary waves.
Hmm.
Do a lot of customers understand that they don't have to eat the whole elephant at once, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
No, I
Yeah.
mean, some of them do. And I mean, that's how we typically start is like, what's critical to your environment? We'll start there. Unfortunately, the way business works, in some cases, we come in at an application cycle where maybe their data protection product that they're using is up for maintenance and needs to be refreshed. And so it's like our only option is to do the whole environment. So they're not paying double duty on two different solutions. But in some cases where they have assets that they can sweat in their older environment, let's start with your critical applications and work our way down and provide our better security practices around those things that you need to create your minimum viable operations in your environment, and then we'll start to scale out over time. One of the great benefits of Cohesity is the scale out capabilities, where you can incrementally scale out and add nodes to our platform as time goes on. So there's no lift and shift or complete application refreshes or anything like that.
So
There's a new acronym. You said minimum viable operational
Operations, minimum viable operations. Yeah.
MVO. Sweet. I'm gonna use that.
no, we're
I didn't use
supposed
the
to not be
acronym, I
creating new
spelled it
ones,
out.
Aaron. Come on.
Right.
So
And it,
So let's
Go
say
ahead.
that folks that are listening, maybe some of the security people that are out there have either been hands off of backups for one reason or another, or are or maybe the operations people or the infrastructure people are kind of hoarding that space because they've owned it, and we know how tribal and territorial technology people can get, right? So talk a little bit, or maybe give some ideas that security people can go to, either their leadership or to these other teams. Like, these are the reasons why security needs to be involved, and maybe we've been using an antiquated backup system for 20 years, and why it's time for us to look at a security centric backup system in 2024.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing there is to exercise your plan. And in that, you're going to find your gaps. Like Prashant and Spencer mentioned, we hold these ransomware workshops pretty frequently in different territories. And we invite our customers into these, where we have, it's kind of a virtualized environment that we go through a simulation event of a real life ransomware attack, where we assign, like, I think it's 5 different personas to people at a table, like the CIO, the CISO, the CTO, marketing person, a legal person. So they all have different perspectives from what angle to take as we go through the simulation. And as they're going through it, there's obviously gaps in the simulation that they have to uncover, but then they immediately start thinking about, what is this in their environment? What gaps do they have? Are they going to trip over the same thing that happened in this simulation event? And out of that, there comes a lot of good conversations. It's not a marketing thing. It's not even a product or a Cohesity thing per se. It's to help develop a plan and find those gaps. And that's where the security people really come in, is like, okay, we went through this. It's kind of like a tabletop. We understand that there's going to be gaps. I think we need to run through this in real life, do a real test in our environment to see if we're capable of recovering and withstanding an attack from different angles. And that's where the security folks need to really be at that table to add their value.
Well, if you think about it from a workflow of how it kind of unfolds in a real world cyber event scenario, you find out your data is compromised, encrypted, whatever it is, you've been asked to pay a ransom. Your first step generally is to, well, do we have a clean copy of the data somewhere? Well, that's the backup platform.
Mm-hmm.
Well, is the backup platform compromised? Well, of course, that's where the bad guys are now going, right? It's been that way for a very long time, ever since the Sony hack. That was the first big publicized hack where we knew the backup platform was compromised. So if you have all the security principles applied on our platform, guaranteed data is going to be there. Well, okay, so if the backup platform now is more than just a backup platform, it can actually tell you which ransomware or crypto lock or crypto worm, whatever are you hit with. Well, then now that makes it easier for you to actually remediate it, right? If you know what the disease is, you can take the right medicine or whatever. And then on top of that, nowadays with exfiltration, especially in healthcare, a space I covered for a while here, you have to and this is not just healthcare, but industry wide and across the world with large corporations, you have to notify whoever's affected, your end user, right? Your patients, if your mortgage, your end customers, and any sector. You have to tell them, hey, you've been breached, and here's, we've all gotten these letters in the mail. Once every now and then you say, okay, well, here's a 1 year of credit monitoring for your trouble or something like that. Well, that's, required by the governing bodies to be done in a certain amount of time. So what if now your backup platform can actually integrate with, like a data classification tool that can now tell you, okay, these many people's social security number, health ID number, address, phone number, all these things were compromised. So now we can quickly I mean, nobody wants to do this, but you have to, right? You have to let all your end patients know that, the customer that I had that was breached, 800,000 patients, and they had to be notified. So we're kind of trying to evolve this into more than just backup. Into your kind of a question on security. That's where we're seeing a lot more security focus.
So talk a little bit about, maybe again, my company's been using an antiquated backup system for God knows how long, probably since I was actually doing it. But like the modern architecture, what's required to get Cohesity up and running? Are you guys cloud based? What's on like what does the infrastructure look like to build out a Cohesity backup system?
Yeah, I mean, Cohesity in itself, being modern technology, is software defined. So we allow you to deploy Cohesity in a number of different manners, whether that's in the data center on commodity off-the-shelf x86 servers, or in a virtualized environment as virtual appliances, or in the cloud. We also have a software as a service-based solution that you can subscribe to, where we own the infrastructure and you're just paying for what you consume, which makes it really easy to get started. It's literally just initiate the subscription, create your policies, and start backing things up, because we do take the API type of approach. So we're not having to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of vendors out there that have created these APIs for backup for their platform, like VMware has with V80P, and Nutanix and OpenShift all have APIs that we can integrate with. Even Oracle with RMAN, they've had that for a long time. So we integrate with those backup technologies that are within the application to make it really easy to start and get things moving.
So we talked a little bit about the pre-sales motion, just in terms of, running through some test scenarios and doing some other stuff. Talk a little bit about, I always think it's important of like, what does post-sales with a company look like, right? Like, how are you continuing to work with your customers, ensuring that they're getting the most out of the platform, maybe learning about new features. So I'm a new Cohesity customer. What does my regular interaction with you guys look like?
Yeah, I can step into that because that's my role.
That's your job. Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to be very high touch, right? It's great that you're a customer, but we try to stay engaged from pre-sales side to make sure that the post-sales is going well. We're sitting on the conversations during the deployment. There's a high degree of collaboration between the post-sales and pre-sales to make sure that we pass on the information, sizing information, how the cluster should be configured. There's many different settings that we use in our sizing tool, and we want to make sure that those are applied when it's deployed. Otherwise you could uh, consume more space than you intended, or performance implications, right? And once it's deployed, we do a quarterly business reviews with every customer. So this is a big part of our business, where every quarter we get together with the customer to review their environment. A lot of our customers utilize our TAM, technical account manager services, so that there's a dedicated person in case if there's tickets to follow up. If there's an idea that they have to improve the product, we take that internally and file it as an idea. And basically, it's just a dedicated, well, designated, I should say, a person that listens to the customer's concerns, as well as helps them follow best practices. If there's a new code version coming out, advise them on that. If there's a field notice coming out saying, hey, this vulnerability requires you to move to this particular patch and you should do it by this date. We're all involved with that, making sure that the customers are deploying the technology we sold them on. It's great during pre-sale cycles when they go, wait, you guys have all these cool integrations and security best practices, and we love the product and we're going to buy it. Well, but then after that, if you don't actually implement that, right? If you don't do the simple things like MFA or other things that we have on the platform that are Cohesity specific and allows you to have the strongest possible environment, so you make it really hard for someone to get in. And if somebody does get in unauthorized, they can't do any destructive things.
Yeah.
So we have reports internally on that. These customers should be talked about implementing these best practices, and then we just kind of keep them up to date. As you know, this is a fast evolving area, IT in general. So I've been here 3.5 years, which is a decent amount of time, but I would say just in the last couple of years, every 6 months, it seems like we're kind of coming out with something that's very impactful, whether that's something like a secure vault or all the other things I talked about that add on top of the technology. So we use
Yeah.
that business review time as an education session, right? Like,
Mhm.
here's what we have coming out, here's where we're going. And then that could be a customer requesting more information. Well, tell me more. Let's have a demo. Maybe that's something we want to potentially purchase to enhance our capabilities and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think all of that stuff is so important. Just, I most of the time, if I see a company moving from one platform to a competitor platform, it's not the technology. In fact, it's almost never the technology. It's almost always the service and support and post-sales support that I see be the big issue. So good to see that you guys are kind of all in on keeping your customers happy after they've signed the PO. That's an important thing.
Absolutely.
Well, you got to keep the money coming in, right? I mean, that's just kind of the world.
There's that too. There's always some money. Yeah, that is true.
And then keeping them up to date, because you don't always know the projects at hand and what's coming down the pipeline. People, I mean, most of my customers, and you could probably attest to this too, Matt, because you kind of deal on that other end. Everyone wants to be on their own, and they do their own education up to about 85%. They get almost all the way there, and then they just start verifying information with you, or there's just a couple of little pieces that they didn't understand. So most of the time they could be getting, what is called wrong or bad information, dated information. And as an organization, we're trying to move that with the TAM. We're also trying to progress the features of the platform and the software. And we're trying to give it back to the partners, because we're partner driven only. We don't sell anything directly. So with that being said, you are certified in a handful of different, softwares and platforms and all that. And we want to make sure we're keeping the partners up to date, up to speed, so they're giving good information, that they're trained, or, that's where you got to keep up with the task at hand. Is the internal team trying to manage it themselves? Are they doing it as a service? Are they educated? Do they know what's coming down the pipeline? So then they can plan. And then that way it makes it easier to keep their leadership informed. And, we're staying on top of their organizational objectives, because they change all the time. And it's just, we're just trying to keep everybody up to date. And if you do the work now, blocking and tackling, you get better there. And then it's easier to move forward in the future.
Yeah. And we wonder why our calendars are so full all the time.
Yeah.
Well, hey guys, I learned something today. I learned that backups are important. Mind blowing, I know, but I also learned that security teams, you really need to start taking a look at how your company is doing backups, what's being backed up, make sure that you're resilient from any of those attacks that probably will happen at some point, that you can recover from things like ransomware, which is definitely not going anywhere. And you probably should add some cohesion to your backup systems at your organization. So, Eric, Spencer, Prashant, big thank you for being on the episode today. If you want to get a hold of these guys, there's more information in the description. Please do the like and subscribe on whatever platform that you're doing here to never miss an episode of Not Another Demo. And we'll see everyone for episode 52.